So welcome everybody to our first open research meeting of 2025. It is actually our first ever open research meeting for ICOPS because it's a new series, sort of an event series that we're going to be putting on this year. And it is organised by ICOPS, who are the International Committee on Open Phytolith Science, who I will introduce in my next slide. But these are going to be monthly online meetings. And they're going to, each of them have a different open research topic that they're going to be based on. They're going to have some presentations, but also they can just be discussions as well with an invited speaker, someone who has kind of done this work, applied open research into their research work in archaeology or paleoecology. So really what we're looking to do is to give some really good examples of this work being done. And have some people who have really done this work. So I'm not going to call them experts. We will have experts and everyone is an expert, but people who have tried these things out, who've applied them to their actual archaeological, paleoecological work, and they can show us how it is, what the challenges they've overcome, what the benefits have been from applying these open research practices to their work. At the bottom of my slide, I've got, please do suggest the topic you want to hear about, because we are still forming this whole series of meetings. So if there's someone that you would like to come into the meeting and talk, please do suggest that to us. We've got a few contact details. So these are our lovely ICOPS members. We are an official committee of the International Phytolith Society. And essentially what we're trying to do is to highlight, advocate for, and sort of increase the knowledge of open science practices in the phytolith community, but also more broadly in the archaeological and paleoecological, other disciplines as well, ecological. We have lots of disciplines we go across. So really just sort of push towards using open research practices more. And you can contact us. So we have a Slack group, and I'll share these slides in the chat in a minute, so you can click on them. But we have a Slack workspace. We do have a mailing list actually, which I do need to check. We have a lovely website which is multilingual, and we also you can connect with us on Twitter. Actually, it's X now, and also Facebook. So that's how to get in touch with us. Just for today's meeting, or for all our meetings, we have a code of conduct which essentially says just everyone be nice to each other. If you think someone hasn't been particularly nice and respectful, then please do contact me, or also Celine, who's in ICOPS. Her address is on the slides as well, and I'll put this in the chat as well once I finish speaking. And that's all I want to say, because actually I'm not the host for today. Actually, I didn't even introduce myself, but my name is there. It's Emma Green, and I am the chair of ICOPS, work with all these lovely ICOPS committee members. But Javi is another member of our committee, and he is going to be chairing the session today. So over to you, Javi, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Emma. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the 2025 Open Research Meetings by ICOPS. For our first session, we're happy to welcome Dr. Julia Kurtz. Julia is an associate product manager at Protocols.io, a division of Springer Nature, whose mission is to foster scientific advancement through collaboration among researchers and to promote experimental transparency, reproducibility, integrity, and accountability through sharing and publishing detailed experimental protocols. With a PhD in medicinal chemistry and experience in both academic and commercial research settings, Julia understands the challenges scientists face in documenting and sharing their work, and she is actively helping researchers embrace open methods sharing to streamline their workflows and promote reproducibility. Today, she will present on Open Methods, the Next Frontier in Open Science, Increasing Recognition and Reproducibility. As Emma said before, please feel free to leave questions or comments in the chat. We will address them at the end of the talk. And again, thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Julia, for being here.
Thanks very much, Javier, for the introduction and for having me today. I'll start by sharing my slides. Everyone can see that all right?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. So Javier already gave you a bit of an introduction about me, but just to elaborate on my role, I'm really interested in increasing awareness of protocols.io across different research disciplines. And then I'm also involved in training researchers on the best way to use it and get the most out of protocols.io. Emma said she's already recording this presentation. I'll also share these slides with her. There's some links in the slides that you can then follow later if you want to refer back. So this is a quick agenda of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a refresher on kind of open access and FAIR principles, but I think people might have some initial familiarity with that. Then I'll talk a little bit about modular publishing, and that will lead me into talking about methods sharing and protocols.io. And then I'll also talk about, how methods sharing can really benefit you and your research. And depending how much time we have at the end, I will jump out of the slideshow and we can go onto protocols.io and see what's possible. And Javier has already given me some great examples of already published protocols on protocols.io that are relevant to paleoecology. And then there'll be a Q&A as well. So the focus today is on open methods. And when I say open methods, I mean, sharing your methods and protocols of what you did in the lab, in the field, in as much detail as possible, using a repository with persistent identifiers, versioning, and forking functionality. And I'll elaborate on that in a little bit more detail. So over the past 1 to 2 decades, the open science movement has focused a lot on open access publications and open and fair data and code. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. But really, if you're sharing your data, you need to be sharing your methods as well, because that data can only be interpreted and built upon if you understand the context of how it was produced. And so fortunately, more recently, we're seeing more policy recommendations and trends towards open methods sharing. So if anyone isn't familiar, this is the concept of FAIR data principles. And it was because it initially proposed for research data, in that data shouldn't just be open, it should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But it can really be extended to other research outputs as well. So, like methods. So, findable means that data or a method needs to be indexed in a searchable resource with a persistent identifier so that you're not having, broken links down the line. It needs to be accessible with no limitations to access except for legal or ethical considerations. The information should also have a common structure, be linked to other data or methods, and there needs to be clear what usage is available and have provenance. So there should be able to see the history of that data, what's the source, how, and track how it evolves over time. And so it's been established that sharing data is important. And I'm going to talk about why method sharing is really the natural next step. So this is a nice analogy that we like to show. And you can see in that photo that there's a bunch of cookies. They all look very different. And those cookies were actually all made using the same recipe, but there were very minor tweaks to that recipe. And it had a really big impact on how those cookies looked. So you can only understand why that cookie looks the way it looks. If you really like one cookie, you can only bake that cookie again if you understand the minor tweaks that were made to that method. And so we really want to be sharing all details of a method, including really minor changes. And unfortunately, methods aren't shared in enough detail. This is, quite an old paper, but this is talking about the cancer reproducibility project that was done, several years ago, and that they looked at 50 high impact papers in cancer biology, tried to reproduce the studies, and one of the biggest challenges was that the recipes were incomplete, missing steps, details, ingredients. And there was also a more recent kind of overview of that done by the Center of Open Science, and they found that 0% of the protocols in those papers were completely described. So there's a lot of work that we can do with sharing complete methods, in cancer biology and other areas of science as well. And so this is what we're seeing a little bit more of nowadays. On the left here is the UNESCO recommendation on open science. So all the scientific outputs that are related to publications, and that includes workflows and protocols, should be deposited in a suitable open repository. So there's another right up here on the right that, people are doing great work trying to put more detailed methods in the supplementary information, and that's a really great start. But if you are sharing methods, we encourage you to do so in a fair manner. So supplementary information, it's not text mined, it's not indexed, and so it's not searchable. So there's no way for someone to independently find information that's in supplementary information if they don't already find the paper. And so this leads me into the concept of modular publishing. So for the past several hundred years, there's been, scientists use traditional research papers as the main kind of metric and method of success and way to share research. But, with the internet, there's a shift that we can do this in a way that's more suitable to the way that science is done now. And that's by breaking down a research project into smaller standalone outputs or modules that are published independently. Be it codes, methods, or data, they can all be published separately and then linked into the research publication that might be your central story of your research. And I've got an example of that here. So this is the Nature Communications paper, and they've put in their data availability statement. And so the different modules of their research, though, they had gene expression constructs, and those were deposited in AdGene, which was the appropriate repository. The protocols were deposited onto protocols.io, and the molecular structure of the enzymes they were looking at was in the protein data bank. So for all the different outputs, they should be deposited in a repository that suits, their structure. For example, in this instance, there's 3D enzyme structures. You could hub still images of those files in the publication, and people do, but that's not the best way to share that information. In the protein data bank, people can go, they can download the relevant files and work on them. And we want people to be able to do the same thing with protocols. And so that's where I'll talk a little bit about protocols.io. So that's what I work with. And really the mission is to make it easy to share method details. So before, during, and after publication. So there are kind of two sides to protocols.io, the website. So on the one hand, we're an open access repository for sharing methods and protocols. It's free to read and it's free to publish. We currently have over 20,000 public protocols on the platform. The other side is that you can use it as a private collaboration tool. And that's more the monetized and paid side of the platform. If people want a place to store their protocols privately, if they don't wish to publish or before publishing. And this is to show you what a protocol looks like on protocols.io. The key thing that I want to highlight here is that unlike a protocol or Word document that might be shared on a lab's website or in the supplementary information, the protocols on protocols.io are really dynamic and interactive. So you could run through that protocol step by step, ticking off each step is completed. You can add in images and videos. People can comment on each step. You could get a DOI for that specific protocol when you publish it. And you can create new versions of that protocol, and people can fork those protocols as well. And what that means is that they create their own private editable copy of that protocol. They can adapt it for a relevant situation. When they publish that fork, it will always be linked back to the protocol that it was forked from. So people know who was the original developer. And this is a little bit more about the different publishing options. So you can make it a protocol available publicly immediately, or maybe you want to put the DOI of that protocol into the methods section of a manuscript that you're writing, but you don't want to make the protocol public yet. You can reserve a DOI, put it in your manuscript, and we'll detect when that manuscript's been published and then publish your protocol as well. And if you're in the process of, adapting a protocol, you can post a draft, which is a preliminary version of your protocol, and it doesn't have a DOI because you'd be changing it. We also have partnerships with journals that mean that you can get your protocol peer reviewed. So this is an example of a partnership that we have with PLOS ONE. And so if you do get your protocol peer reviewed, it gets a nice little peer review badge. So people know that it's a peer reviewed protocol, because when you publish protocols on protocols.io, we don't do we don't do a peer review for that. And this slide as well shows how you can link those protocols to your publications. So instead of writing out a really condensed method section of what you did, you can put your full detailed protocol on protocols.io, publish it, and then in your manuscript you say, just like this example here, the protocol is published on protocols.io, and then people can go and find the method there. So now I'll talk a little bit about the benefits of sharing open and detailed protocols and methods. So the first one is reproducibility. I won't spend too much time on that because I think, we kind of talked about that already. When people don't have access to the detailed method, it's hard to then reproduce that method. And I have several examples that we've collected of researchers being very frustrated with trying to access methods. So you can see, for example, this one in the middle is that there's a citation chain, devices were fabricated as previously described, and eventually the original paper said devices were fabricated with conventional methods, which is not very helpful and means that it can't be reproduced. So the next is the discoverability and findability of your work. So I've got an example of that here, what that means in a practical sense. So this was kind of a Twitter interaction that we saw where someone was looking for a protocol to do RNA extraction for primary cortical neurons, so brain cultures. And someone else pointed to this basic protocol on protocols.io. And so that's this protocol. One second. That's this protocol here. And that protocol is linked to this paper in GigaScience. But we can see that that paper was originally on a 3-spine sickleback parasite. So that's a fish parasite. So the concept of this person who is working on brain cultures running across a paper on fish parasites, maybe it could happen, but it would be a lot harder to find that paper first and then find the protocol within that paper, rather than look for an RNA extraction protocol and find that on protocols.io. Another thing about the findability of protocols, when you publish your protocols on protocols.io, they are open access. So even if you link to them within a research article that's behind a paywall, maybe your publication's behind a paywall, but people will always be able to find those methods, and the methods will be open access. And I also want to talk about getting recognition and credit for the work that you're doing. So a nice thing about having separate research outputs is that you can have distinct author lists. So here we can see the paper on the top, and Kelsey Ramirez is 4th author on that paper. And we know that author order shouldn't matter, but when the protocol that's linked within that paper is on the bottom, and she's 1st author on that protocol. So it's a way for you to demonstrate your contribution to a piece of work, because lots of people are needed to publish a paper. But if you can point to your protocol and say, that was my contribution, that's what I did, and you can put that on your CV and demonstrate your expertise. And again, when you have a separate research output, you can track how that research output, what impact it has. So the protocols that are published on protocols.io, they have metrics associated with them. So you can see how many people is viewing it over time, who's bookmarking, who's creating those forks of your protocol and adapting it for their own use. And we see as well, so this is an example where this is the views of the protocol, and these are the views of the paper. So sometimes the protocol can be much more practically useful, and so you can demonstrate the impact that your protocol is having. And then these are some nice quotes. So my colleague Gabrielle, who's head of outreach, he interviews protocol authors. And this is John Barrows, who's a postdoc who published a protocol on protocols.io, got that protocol peer-reviewed. And as a result of that process, he was, tapped as a reviewer because they wanted someone that was familiar with the specific technique that he published on protocols.io. So it was really nice for him as an early career researcher to establish himself as, an expert in that technique. And he also thought it was a really nice output that he could put on his CV. And then in terms of collaboration, if your work is more discoverable, you're more likely to find people who are doing the same thing as you, want to collaborate. And we have a user of protocols.io, so Luciano, and he was using protocols.io to share his protocols and said that 80% of his collaborations were a direct result of that. So there is a lot of visibility that comes from sharing on protocols.io. They're indexed on Google. 60% of our traffic comes from Google. So people are finding protocols independently of the research papers. And then in terms of compliance, so this kind of links into what I was talking about earlier with the policy recommendations around complying with open science policies, as well as funders' requirements for data management and sharing. And quite a lot of journals, publishers, and funders do encourage the use of protocols.io. For example, Wiley, they're a direct competitor of Springer Nature, but they recommend putting your protocols in protocols.io as part of their publishing process. And then to bring things back to FAIR principles, this is a little bit of how protocols.io can kind of tie into that. So as I said before, the protocols are indexed on Google Scholar, they're findable, they have a DOI, so there's a persistent identifier. And then in terms of accessibility, so every protocol published on protocols.io is published under a CC BY license. So that means that they're, free to read, free to reuse for any purpose, as long as credit to the authors is attributed. And protocols.io also has an open API, which means that anyone can come in, extract the metadata, or automatically integrate it with other platforms or applications. And because the protocols on protocols.io can be versioned, forked, and run, the platform can also maximize the reuse of those protocols. So people across multiple disciplines use protocols.io. The original kind of founders of protocols.io were I think there was a data scientist and some molecular biologists, and they worked on protocols.io for around 10 years before it got acquired by Springer Nature. So there was initially a bit of a bias towards more wet lab research and biological research, but really it's we're kind of agnostic to the type of discipline that you're from. And these are some examples that you could review later if you wanted, on people using protocols.io across disciplines. But what I want to focus more on today are some examples relevant to phytoliths and archaeologies. So Javier's given me some great examples, and then I'll shortly move on to protocols.io and show you what those protocols look like on the platform. Before I do that, I will talk about if you start using protocols.io, you want help, there's lots of resources. You can see it's a very crowded slide. So if you want to learn more, I would encourage you we run regular webinars, sign up, or you can go on YouTube and watch videos, and that will be able to cover a lot more information on how to use protocols.io than what I have time to cover today. So with that said, I will stop sharing and then reshare on protocols.io. Okay. So this is an example of a protocol published on phytolith extraction and accounting procedure. So I'll run through this protocol, a little bit of an anatomy of a protocol. So the first thing we can see is that this is version 2 of the protocol. So the original version was published in March 2022. But if you want to make changes or updates to that protocol, you can always publish a new version of the protocol, no matter how minor the change is. And then people can always go back and see how the versions evolve over time, and you can even go back and compare the different versions. We can see that someone's made a comment on this protocol. So if I go down to the steps, there's the ability to comment on each individual step. So if you had a question that you wanted to ask the author, or you had maybe a comment or tip that you wanted to add, you can go in and add that as well. And then we can also see that you can have different sections, and then there's a step-by-step method. So you can add in notes of important information that you don't want missed, images as well. I'll scroll through this so people can kind of see what it looks like. and each protocol has an automatic table of contents. So, some protocols on the platform are over 100 steps long, so you can go through and navigate to the different sections. So how much time do I have? I can't see my clock. Am I okay for time?
Yes, you are. We still
Okay.
have at least 30 minutes.
Okay, perfect. I think it was supposed to be 30 minutes. Yeah, so and then what I'll show you as well, so anyone can come in and they can copy or fork this protocol, and that would, create your own protocol within protocols.io. And we can look at who's forking that protocol over time. So I'll look at another example. So this is a COVID sequencing protocol that was published on protocols.io, and it was forked from a Ebola virus sequencing protocol. So the Ebola virus protocol was already on protocols.io. And you can see in January 2020, really, really early in the pandemic, the community needed a COVID one. And so the Ebola virus protocol could be adapted for the different circumstance, which was a different virus. And so those protocols are largely the same, and we always know where it comes from. So I'll actually show you, I'll go in and compare the two protocols. And so we can see that, the steps are largely the same, and there's highlighting the differences between them. And then we can also visualize the reuse of that protocol. So these are the different versions. I'll open up all of them, and we can see how they've evolved over time for different uses. So these are all of the different forks that have been created, and then the new versions of those forks as well. Another really nice thing about publishing on protocols.io is this concept that we call dynamic permanence. So it's where when you create a new version, the link to that original version always takes you to that version, but you'll be notified that a newer version is available. So I'll show you what that looks like. So for this protocol, if I follow the DOI that takes me to version 2, I'll receive this pop-up that lets me know that there's, a version 3 or a version 4 available, and will take me to that newer version. So I can always see what was what the protocol looked like at the time of publication, and I can also go and view the updated one. And so when you create an account, sorry, I'm battling with the Zoom pop-up here. When you create an account on protocols.io, you'll start out in your own private workspace. So with the free version of protocols.io, you can have 2 private protocols, but again, you can publish as many protocols as you want. As soon as you publish one of those protocols, you can make another private one. And you can add other people to that workspace as well, so they can collaborate with you on that protocol. If you have your research group, everyone can be on the workspace working on that protocol before it's going to be published. We also have public workspaces as well. And so this is another COVID-related example. So this is if someone's searching on protocols.io for a workspace, they can come across and find this. And it's when you're publishing protocols, you can publish them to a workspace. So it's kind of like a collection of protocols around a specific research discipline or your group, really whatever you choose to do. And then people can join that workspace, and they can have kind of discussions around method development, and you can see all that as well. So I think that's most of what I wanted to show today. There's a lot of other functionality in the private side of the platform, but I won't talk about today because I really want to focus on the open sharing aspect. But I've seen some messages in the chat, so I don't know if they're questions, but I want to leave time for questions. So I'll go ahead and share my last slide, which has a kind of, I do have a, while people are thinking of questions, a feedback survey that I would like to ask people to fill out for this webinar. And I'll pop a link to that in the chat. So yeah, we can start Q&A. I'll put this link into the chat. And yeah, Javier or Emma, please let me know what questions there have been. Oops.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very clear. There are no questions yet, but does anybody have any question? Feel free to unmute or just leave them in the chat. Okay, Emma, go ahead.
I have a question. My question is actually for you, Javi, because we could see that Julia showed one of the protocols that you had put on the platform. So I wanted to know from your experience as a researcher actually doing it, how did you get on? Because I assume like probably, I'm thinking about probably the first time that you did it. What kind of challenges did you come up against? You know, and what kind of benefits do you think that you got in your, you know, personally and maybe in your research group from actually doing that?
Thank you for the question. So well, I co-authored that protocol, but I work also on another protocol that for which I'm the first author. I would say that the first challenge I found was to concentrate everything you have to do in a kind of simple protocol, you know? And also then I started thinking about if adding photos was useful or not, what kind of tips people want to hear, like for example, safety tips. And basically what at the beginning I thought it was very easy because I've been extracting and analyzing phytoliths for a long time. I realized it's more complex than what I thought initially, and putting all together it's kind of challenging but also exciting.
Yeah, nice. That's great to hear that you had like such a great experience. I'll just flag Emma and Javier. I don't think it lets me put the link to the feedback in the chat. It says unable to send file due to admin restrictions.
Oh, I
So
don't
should
know
I
why
send
that
that
is.
to you independently? And then, because I saw Javier was putting links.
Yeah, and other people have as well. So I don't know what the problem is.
Oh, that is
for
weird.
you. Do you know what? I can make you a co-host and then probably that will be unlocked for you. There we go. Have a go now at doing it. And then,
I
oh,
just put
Javi's
it in
done
the
it anyway.
chat, yeah.
Okay,
Ah,
thank you
you're
so
so
much.
efficient.
Yeah.
Javi, you didn't talk about the benefits. So once you had got over the sort of challenge of putting your method in there and simplifying and kind of doing all that thinking, what do you think the added benefit for you was for doing all of that work?
So well, one of them was to, as I was saying, organizing my ideas and writing them down. That was really helpful. And because that also forced me to read more literature and think about things that I was used to do on a regular basis. And then the benefits is that, of course, as Julia was saying, there's more exposure and people know better what you're doing, and people can read your protocol, use your protocol, and even cite your protocol.
Mm.
So these are all benefits, definitely.
Right. Thanks, Adam.
Xavier, you can go, yeah.
We'll just start to thank you for the presentation and to present this tool. I've never heard about it, and looks very useful. I'm working with charcoal, and in my region, I'm one of the first one using it with archaeology. And this type of tool I find very promising. My question is for the people that use it, or for you, Julia, do you think it's best to start using protocol.io after the methodology and the protocol was done, or use it like as a tool to building it during the research, or more as a tool after the methodology was done? So just a simple question, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. No, I understand. I think I would highly recommend using it as you're developing that method. So in the protocols.io editor, it's similar to any text editor. You can start building out your protocol, and I would highly recommend doing that in the platform beforehand, because then it's already in that stepwise protocols.io format, and you can see what's possible. So there's, I can show that as well if we have time. There's lots of different components that you can add, like those notes, and you can start thinking about what the best format in terms of sections and subsections would be for your specific protocol. We also understand that not everybody works that way. Some people already have protocols that have been drafted and they are in Word format. So there are ways to import protocols that are already in Word or PDF files into protocols.io and convert them into that stepwise format. I've actually got, I think that's on my next slide. Yeah, so this is different ways that you can get protocols on protocols.io. So again, like I was saying earlier, you could look for a protocol that was kind of maybe already out there on Charcoal, depending, and adapt that for your use. And we have the tool to import text, and we actually have a new AI importer where you can drag and drop a Word file, and it uses AI to put that into the protocols.io format. Of course, because it's AI, you have to check it afterwards, but it does save a lot of time with going from Word files to the protocol files. We also have a protocol entry service, but that is a paid service. And that's where we have a team of editors that come in and put your protocol into the protocols.io format and include all of the components in a way that would be the best way to present it.
Thank you.
Carla?
Hi, a question for Julia. Thank you so much for the presentation and the explanation. I wanted to ask you about peer reviewing. So you said, you said, and I know that the protocols are not peer reviewed. So I wanted to ask whether you can comment a little bit about this decision. So why protocol.io decided not to review protocols, and whether there is any plan for this to change in the future, or if you're thinking about alternative methods of, not like formal peer review, but maybe encourage people to, I don't know, put a comment when they use the protocol saying, I've used it, it works, or something like that. Just a little bit about peer reviewing. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So I think there was a few questions in there. One was on the decision not to peer review the protocols that are published. So I'll say to that it works similarly like a preprint. Preprints aren't peer reviewed. We want people to be able to share their methods very easily. And as I'm sure you're aware, peer review can, be quite a lengthy process, and it will be a hindrance to share your method if it, is not accepted throughout peer review. So yeah, it's more like a preprint model, so it helps to think of it that way. But we know that if people put a lot of work and effort into putting these protocols on protocols.io, and sometimes they want to peer review them as part of that. And so I'll maybe move onto protocols.io. It might be easier to show. So there are options if you want to get your protocol peer reviewed. Let me find it. So this is what it looks like when you're viewing a protocol. So you can see you could publish it directly, and this is the peer review options. And so these are journals that we have existing partnerships with. And you can take your protocol to them and say, I want, to get my protocol peer reviewed. You will need to write up a separate publication that goes along with that. And if you go through that process, you'll get a peer review badge on your protocol. So I think this one has the badge. So that's, I think I talked about that a little earlier.
Yeah.
So then people know that that's a peer-reviewed method. And then I think there was one more part to your question.
Yeah, like some sort of alternative method, not traditional peer review methods, like encouraging people who have used the methods to just put a comment saying I've used it, it works, and just as a just to for you to understand where my question comes from, I was thinking more about the scenario where I don't get to the protocol through a paper or something else, but I just go on protocol.io because I'm interested to starting some new line of analysis, and I want to know what's the a good protocol out there. But then I search in protocol.io, and there are like on the same topic there are several protocols, so it's more like a way for someone in this situation who comes into protocol.io looking for a protocol to understand a bit better which one might work better. I don't know, I mean, I know it's a big of a general question, but
Yeah, no, I understand the question for sure. Yeah, so we do have this kind of works for me button. So it's not like a like, but if someone comes along and they try that method, they can click that to show that it works in their lab. So you can imagine that if it's working in lots of other people's labs, it's probably going to work in your lab. So yeah, this one has 4. I think this is another quite popular one, has like 65. And when you're searching on protocols.io for protocols, you can filter by the number of works for me as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really nice. Thanks.
No problem.
I really like the comments function of protocols.io, and after I saw this, I was thinking, well, this might be useful in papers also. Like, I wish journals would do the same thing, and people would just, highlight sections of papers and just leave comments or questions. Talking about questions, there's one in the chat by Sayed, asking Julia, I guess, if Protocols.io is a platform similar to ResearchGate or Academia. .edu, or if it's something different.
Yeah, so I am familiar with those platforms. My understanding is they're more of kind of a forum for questions and answers and discussion, and a place where you can kind of create a profile for yourself, share your research articles. So, you can comment and ask questions on protocols.io, but it's a lot more than that. We have we're a specific repository for open methods sharing. When you put things on protocols.io, you receive that DOI to cite your protocol that's been shared. And yeah, we're completely open access repository. If that is a question relating to our business model, so again, the open part of protocols.io is completely free. And then if people want to use it for private storage and collaboration on protocols, for example, some like pharma and biotechs, they don't want to publish their protocols, but they still want to use protocols.io to share them internally. We charge for that side of the platform. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Xavier, please go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I just want to ask a little question about the workspace And you said that multiple person can work on the same protocol.
Mhm.
How does that work? Do people have to create, I guess, a protocol.io, and does people a bit like Docs or I guess a Word? Sometimes you can both edit the same protocol at the same time, and you can see the different modification by each member. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the process of multiple person working on the same protocols? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So what you're describing is possible. So let me find the file manager. So these are the workspaces that I'm in here on the left. So if you're an admin of a workspace, you can go in and control who are the members and what permissions those members have. So for example, some people may be able to just view, some people may be able to view, edit, and publish. And so if people have edit permissions, these are private unpublished protocols. They can come in and edit those concurrently. So, and there is, you can see kind of the version history of how that protocol evolved over time. So maybe I've got another example here. So if I go into history, you can see that's me and what changes that I've made. So I'm the only person who's edited this protocol, but if there was someone else, you would be able to see their changes in history as well. And they would be able to make any edits that they wanted.
Julia, now that you're showing this, can you also show people how like all the functions that they're available? Because something I really like about protocols.io is that you can add images, videos, code, tables, as many steps as you need and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what Javier is talking about are these components. And so we've got a lot of different components, but essentially it's for highlighting different variables or equipment that would be important in the experiment. So for example, we can see that you can add in components for amount, for timers, for temperatures. We've got a smart component. So if there's a specific value that needs to be filled out during the experiment, you can put that in. These are the notes, expected results, safety information. You can link to software, put in code or commands. You can even link to other protocols. Yeah, images, videos. So you can, if you have a really short video, you can put it directly into protocols.io. If you have a longer video, I think over 1,000 megabytes, you could put it on YouTube and then embed it in protocols.io like shown here. And we also can have tables. These have formulas just like in Excel. And then when you put information in a table, when people are viewing that protocol, anyone can download that table so they could then use it in their own lab. And we also have this nice plate map feature for researchers who use, like, for example, 96-volt plates for running assays. So those are just some of the components, but there's really a lot for people's different purposes.
Thank you.
I have maybe one last question, and I will stop after that. As I understand it, it's how do the protocol.io connect with the data? Does it incorporate the data, or does the data go? It doesn't incorporate the data. Data go on the other database, and what's the link with data from a particular study with the protocol? Does it have a links, or it's two separate things? Or yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe it's not the purpose of protocol.io, but
Yeah, thanks for your question. So yeah, we are a repository for methods, not for data. There are other repositories for data, depending on what data you have. Or there are general repositories. There's like Figshare and Dryad. So I would recommend, if you wanted to link to data, you can put the DOI of your protocols.io protocol in data in where you're sharing your data in other places, or have your publication as your kind of central linking point. So I think like that example I showed earlier, there's the publication. In the data availability statement, you list all the places where you can find the data and the protocol, etc.
Does anybody else have any question, comments? Okay, I think we're done for today. Thank you, Julie, again for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will publish the recording of this session in our YouTube channel. Let me put the link again in the chat if you want to go back. And please feel free to reach us if you have more questions about applying the open science principles in your research, and hope to see you all in the next meeting.